morning, everyone. I'm Kaitlin Kindbergh. I'm an intelligence analyst at my MSA, Specialized Security Solutions. As Joe said, we have been following the nuclear crisis at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power station over the last week or so and have been providing our clients with updates throughout the course of the last week. Today's brief is a compilation of those analytical products that we've created. And I'm going to go through a timeline of the event, as well as provide some helpful information regarding radiation protective measures and radiation detection equipment. Now on Friday, March 11th, the earthquake and the subsequent tsunami hit Japan, at which point the functioning reactors at the Fukushima plant, units 1, 2, and 3, had shut down automatically. Units 4, 5, and 6 were already shut down for maintenance purposes. Now I'm going to show you a map here of where the plants are in relation to the earthquake, the March 11th earthquake. So after the reactors had shut down, their backup diesel generators for running the plant's cooling systems had failed. A series of explosions occurred starting at the Unit 1 reactor on March 12th, just a day after the earthquake and the tsunami. Explosions followed at the Unit 2 and 3 reactors on March 15th and the 14th, respectively. As a result, Units 1, 2, and 3 each lost their water and thus their ability to cool down. The exposure of the reactor's fuel rods to the air had increased the risk of the spreading of radiation, as well as the potential for an eventual meltdown. Now, the worst case scenario of the entire crisis would be a full meltdown caused by the complete inability of the containment vessels to contain the radioactive material. Now, Unit 4, which had previously been unaffected by the earthquake and the tsunami, had experienced a fire last Tuesday, the 15th. The fire was quickly extinguished, but the reactor was still badly damaged. So I will show you a picture here of the Unit 4 reactor after the fire. Now, about 5 months ago, Unit 4's fuel rods were removed for maintenance and stored in a spent fuel pool. This is a process that the Japanese use called full core discharge, in which all of the fuel, which is still usable in a reactor, is moved during maintenance. Now, in the United States, only the most worn out fuel rods are placed in spent fuel pools for storage, where they could stay for years. The tsunami had wiped out the plant's emergency generators, and the water in the spent fuel pool next to the Unit 4 reactor could not circulate. So fresh water was not able to be pumped into the Unit 4 reactor, causing the rods in the pool to overheat. This overheating caused the water that was in the pool to evaporate into steam. Now the heat in the reactor caused the fire, and now the fire burned the roof, which released the radiation from the Unit 4 reactor. These rising levels of radiation being released from the reactors had a severely detrimental impact on the efforts of cooling the damaged reactors last week. Initially, much of the focus was placed on the Unit 3 reactor, which is the only reactor on site that contains a mixed fuel called mixed oxide, or MOX, which includes plutonium. Now, if MOX makes it into the atmosphere, it would create a much more dangerous plume than those caused by uranium from the uranium fuel rods. On Tuesday the 15th, Japan's Prime Minister Naoto Kan had urged the Japanese citizens within a 12.5-mile radius of the plants to evacuate the area, and those who are within 19 miles of the plant to remain indoors and take shelter. The United States, on the other hand, urged U.S. citizens within 50 miles radius of the plant to evacuate. This is a 38-mile difference than what the Japanese had advised. The high radiation levels at the plant caused authorities to begin using unconventional methods of trying to cool down the reactors and raise the water levels. This included the deployment of helicopters and police water cannon trucks. Some of these had to be turned away because of the high radiation levels, but last Thursday it was reported that these efforts did help improve the situation, and the radiation levels were brought down from Unit 3. As of yesterday, workers at the plant had made progress in attempting to restore power for the internal cooling systems. However, they were met with some setbacks. As of yesterday, there were smoke plumes coming from the Unit 2 and 3 reactors, which caused another evacuation from the site of the workers. So here we have the Unit 2 reactor and the Unit 3, and these are the smoke plumes that were coming out of there yesterday. So this morning it was reported that one of the spent fuel pools at the Unit 2 reactor had begun overheating again. And now if water in the pool evaporates and exposes the fuel rods to the air, this just leads to more radiation from leaking out of the reactor. So for people in the US, many were worried about the radiation coming from Japan and whether it would make it to the western coastline. A forecast released by a United Nations agency forecasted that a plume would rise from Japan and carry over the Pacific Ocean and make its way to Southern California, as well as other southwestern United States. However, the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, stated that no harmful levels of radioactivity would reach the U.S., as the radiation would dilute as the plume makes its travel. They said that in the worst case scenario, there would be no extremely harmful radiation levels that would affect the health of people living in the United States. It would only cause very minor health consequences. That's basically how the crisis has been unfolding over the last week. Some of our clients have employees in Japan, so they had been asking us about protective actions for anyone potentially affected by the radiation. I worked with our own subject matter expert here, Matthew Dimmick, to compile these recommendations. And now the first is in regards to time. It is important to limit the amount of time spent in a radiologically contaminated area. If you limit your time in the area, you will receive a lower dose of radiation. Next is distance. The dose received is directly associated with the proximity to the source of the radiation. For instance, if you double your distance from the source, you cut your exposure down to just a quarter of the dose. Our next recommendation is in regards to shielding. The key point to remember with shielding is that the more dense the material between your body and the source, be it buildings or the earth, for example, the lower the dose you will receive. Another recommendation that our subject matter expert has made was the use of personal protection. So persons in potentially affected areas should consider protecting themselves using a mask to protect their respiratory tract, to reduce the amount of inhaled particles that could cause internal damage to the lungs and the surrounding tissue. And finally, the last point to make here is personal hygiene. It's very important to wash your face and your hands frequently, and to wash the food that you're eating, especially vegetables, and to limit your consumption of food to food that is manufactured or grown outside of the contaminated area. We have also received numerous requests regarding radiation detection equipment. Our subject matter expert, Matthew Dimmick, compiled these recommendations to identify some possible solutions that can provide a layered approach to protecting employees at a facility. An initial measure that could provide some level of confidence and information would be to scan HVAC pre-filters for the presence of radiological contamination. A proper risk assessment should be completed before implementing this methodology. In this risk assessment, it is important to remember that the further away the incident at a facility is located, the less likely it is that a dangerous level of contamination would reach the intake filters. And finally, the deployment of portable radiation detection systems intended to provide temporary detection capability would be an additional stopgap measure. In deploying the detectors, it will be important to ensure that the systems provide an adequate signal to transmit to a central station in the building for monitoring purposes. Now, I've only been able to briefly touch on this topic. If you'd like to request further information regarding the crisis in Japan on this brief or if you'd like to learn more about MSA's intelligence analysis briefs, please feel free to contact myself. The number is 212-509-1336 and the extension is 253. I will be happy to answer any questions you may have, and I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Kaitlin, excellent job. Nice presentation. Certainly, we do appreciate that. And I'm just trying to get you up on the double screen here. There we go. All right. So we've got you up on the screen here with me. Nice job. Does it appear to you folks over at MSA that maybe the Japanese government is finally getting a handle on this? Can you give me any opinion on that?
Judging from what I've researched yesterday, I think that the government, as well as the International Atomic Energy Agency, is hopeful that the crisis will be overcome. However, I think the news this morning with another spent fuel pool becoming overheated again, I think they just keep meeting these blocks, these hurdles that they have to overcome. So, I don't want to say anything where I think that this could potentially get out of hand, but I mean, I'm hopeful, as I'm sure everyone else is, that they can have a handle on this.
Yeah, we know that they're throwing everything they have at it, to try and mediate it and make sure this doesn't become, I guess, a number 6 or a number 7 or something like that on their rating scale. Okay. Yeah. All right, Kaitlin, very nice job. Hope to see more of you on the program in the future, and thank you.